All right, so if anybody has questions, they could put them in the chat. Oh, thanks, Jonathan. I was really trying to cover as much as possible, and I think I had way more content than this time slot allowed for. So I'll definitely be releasing another talk with the rest of the content later on. Definitely didn't cover anything like form validation, just didn't have time for it. There were a lot of like use cases, like I wanted to give you a lot more examples, but I'll definitely be doing that at a later talk. Anybody have any questions? Any problems that you're having at work, getting accessibility prioritized? Because I know that's always an issue. I will for sure be releasing the slides. In fact, let me just start creating opening this up.
So Maria, while you're doing that, let's start with a fun question. What is like a new hobby that you've picked up or that you've been spending more time on during this quarantine time?
Well, I've picked up playing around with resin, and that's been really fun. I've been making like little hair clips and pins and things like that. I know I've shown Ben a couple of them. And then I am big into crocheting, so I've been crocheting some like little toys, and I have a new baby nephew, so.
She's amazing at crocheting, by the way.
Oh, thanks, Ben. All right, so it looks like we have some questions. Let's see. Good for you. This new to view.
So I think Jonathan has a question for you. I was hoping you could explain more about the field set plus legend compared with the div role region ARIA label.
Should be paired with legend. Yes. So it should be paired with legend. So the region role kind of helps you section off parts of your website. And what will happen is the rotor tool, which is one of the tools that I showed when I was using my screen reader, and there was like a black box that kind of allowed me to go through different sections of the website. Region won't necessarily go up there unless you give it an ARIA label. So that's kind of what the region's purpose is to kind of section off your website, not necessarily give you like a form with like content inside it, or like, where like field set and legend are used more for form and input fields, in like that relationship.
So it looks like Julian has a question. What was the number of visits incapacitated by poor webs? So I think basically, do you have any statistics around sort of like poor accessibility when it comes to websites?
Well, I think it's like 90% of the web is not accessible. It's like a ridiculously high number. So, I mean, statistically, I would say most websites out there just do not meet the standards. And even those that do, I mean, the standards can be very hard to meet. And even if you're trying to meet everything, there are some things that are incompatible. Like if you're trying, for example, to meet WCAG 2.1 AAA standards, there are some applications that is literally impossible. So that's where you kind of find 2.1 AA standards being met the most, or like at least being prioritized. But yeah, I would say most of the web is not accessible. So have you worked with accessibility requirements on date range selection? What needs to be considered? Well, make sure, like if you're creating kind of like a custom date range selection is kind of what I'm assuming. Just make sure that things get announced correctly, that they get set correctly, and that the user can navigate through this selection like with keyboard, right? So like everything that should be functional with a mouse should be 100% on keyboard as well. So making sure that you're setting that up, and check that if you're using any ARIA attributes, make sure that you're checking the compatibility with certain browsers with that, as well as some of the assistive technology out there. And again, some of these combinations also matter. So for example, if you're using JAWS or NVDA or VoiceOver, there are screen reader and browser pairings that work best together. And I actually talked about this in one of my previous talks. So I'm going to ask you all for a favor. I am copying my slides here. please someone verify that they were able to get in and open them, if that's okay. So just realize Bootstrap-Vue doesn't have any date range selection feature, only singular selector. So I got to look into that soon. Yes, I would recommend. Maybe Jonathan knows if Chakra UI has something like that. Okay, access denied. Okay, thank you. I will. Okay, let's try this again. This link. Okay, so Jonathan, what is the best way to test accessibility for a team? So for projects I've worked on, I've used Jest to check for ARIA properties in the markup. Would end-to-end testing be the best way to cover users' behaviors and keyword? Well, so this is kind of a hard question because, okay, yeah, thank you for the feedback. I'm glad that the link works. So it's kind of hard because I would say that most of the automated tools out there will cover like 30% of the accessibility issues that your application might have. So there's definitely a lot of manual testing involved. And even if you do include things like end-to-end testing to kind of navigate through the user's behaviors, there's a lot of things that will not be caught there, especially when you're considering users with cognitive disabilities and their experience that they could go through. It's not necessarily something that you could put on a checklist, right? So you have to kind of have a human behind it, making sure that that content makes sense and that it's clear to the user with from many multiple backgrounds, right? So that the use of language is correct, that the visual placement of the content on the page also flows nicely and it's not jumping at you or things like that are very hard to do with any automated testing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Dominic has a question regarding, is there a difference for the screen reader between label test, label input? I guess I'll let you read that, but is there a difference between these two screen snippets, code snippets?
All right, so let me read the code snippets really quick. So label for test and with the input test. And so you're asking kind of about
wrapping
kind of
the label. Yeah,
implicit and explicit label. So when you bind it with the for and the ID, right, that is an explicit label, and that is better supported across assistive technologies than if you were to use a wrapping label. And even though I would say the most common assistive technology do support it, you, again, if you're kind of spending the effort to put accessibility forward and prioritizing that, you do want to reach the most users as possible. So I would say explicit labels are best, which are the ones that you use pairing the input with the ID.
Great. Julian has a question. Is there a UI library that respects accessibility like Vuetify?
Oh, so Jonathan is in the house.
I was going to say.
So Jonathan, he's actually in the chat here. So he has created Chakra UI, and it does, it is kind of like Vuetify, but it does consider accessibility and WCAG standards. So I would really, really recommend you check that out. Yes, thank you for the link. It's right there. Please check it out. And I love seeing more work come in for accessibility. So if anybody's interested, please contribute.
Sounds good. Neelanch had a question regarding, have you met people in real life who need the accessibility options? And what is their view of the web?
Yes. And I guess let me talk a little bit about users with disabilities, right? So there are a lot of types of disabilities. There are permanent disabilities and you know, things that you can see, right? Like if I'm missing a limb or something. But then there are also like invisible disabilities that you might not know I have a disability. Say that I have chronic pain and I have to use my mouse a certain way, or things like that. It's not just like, you know, colorblind or deaf, or there are so many different aspects, and there's so many like personas behind people with disabilities. So I would say that, yeah, like everybody at some point in their lifetime will have some sort of disability, just like as humans age, right? You start losing your eyesight. Like if you wear glasses, that is a type of assistive technology, right? Like you're using that to help you. And in fact, like a lot of, I was talking to one of my coworkers at CVS, who's also an accessibility designer, and he was saying how even typewriters, they were actually invented for people with disabilities. And then now they became like this thing that everybody uses. Everybody has a keyboard, right? So just kind of questioning like where those devices come from and who actually needs them, I would argue that we all need them. And our point of view as a people, right, is the web should be more accessible and it will improve all of our experiences. And it's not just for people with disabilities. It's, if you're in a loud environment and you are watching a video, captions are going to be very helpful. If you have a baby in your hands and you need just to do everything with one hand, making sure that you could rotate your phone in a way that you could access everything in the application is a big deal. So I hope that answered your question. All right, let's see. Do I have any recommendations on using ARIA invalid attribute? I just realized that we're not using it to test our forms. Yes, I would definitely go back and use the ARIA invalid attribute for anything that has an error, any input field that has an error. So whenever you could toggle it on and off, like ARIA invalid true.
Let's see, it looks like... Okay, Thomas has a question. We have a product selection section on our site, 3 product choices, and a legend column on the side. The product columns are selectable, but how would you tackle comparison of each column based on the legend, making it understandable for people using screen readers?
So the way I'm imagining this is you have, I'm going to just reiterate, multiple columns, and you want to be able to select each column so that they could compare it. And it looks like you provided a link, so let me just open that. And okay, so it just looks like columns with, there's like, making sure that you're using like a table for this, I would say, because it does look like, so it should be semantically behave like a table. But I would say you could create a checkbox, say at the bottom, that allows you to select which ones you're comparing, or even just a menu that allows you to filter out certain columns, if that, depending on how many columns you have and what you need to compare. But if you want to go kind of the checkbox route to select certain columns, then I would make sure that you're using ARIA label and pairing ARIA labeled by, which allows you to grab multiple IDs and pair it throughout the content. So for example, if you were looking at the starter column and you wanted to compare starter with standard column, then the checkbox for each would match the title and then maybe compare, right? So compare starter and then compare standard with starter or something like that. So yeah, definitely look into ARIA labeled by. And if you want to add extra information, use ARIA described by as well. Okay, so supporting accessibility even helps people without disabilities. Just thinking about us developers with keyboard shortcuts. Exactly. Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Or even as we're giving presentations, the use of like the themes that we have on our VS Code matters, right? So like, you might not have a disability, but if you're sitting on the back row of a conference room, you might not be able to see the speaker slides or, the speaker's code because of the color contrast. So even keeping that in mind as as a presenter, right? Making sure that your content as you're giving it is accessible.
Speakers a lot of times like to do like memes and jokes, and which rely on people to watch something. But I always like to, after letting it play for a little bit, read it out to the people in case they can't see it. So that's another way to make sure that, your presentations are accessible as well.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you have any gift, just explain it verbally.
Lucas has a question. What tool do you recommend for testing page accessibility?
Yes, there's a couple of really good ones. And I know Wave was already mentioned. I love using, I prefer using Chrome, and I like using their audit tool, like Lighthouse audit tool. And I also have been really liking IBM's accessibility checker. And I can link to those here. But they're just really good options. And I believe the Chrome, the Lighthouse is particular to Chrome in the DevTools. But I believe that wait, maybe I copied this wrong. Let me know if that link works. It didn't even copy as a link. Nope. Well, look for this.
Yeah, so maybe just give them the Google. There you go. Perfect.
Accessibility checker. Yeah, so that one is really good. And then I use a combination of other tools to help me even in the creation process. So I really like, if you're looking for color contrast, and I know that was kind of one of the questions on the other chat, color contrast tools. I really love using WebAIM's color contrast checker. So what this will help you do is kind of compare your font and your background colors, and it will also check graphical objects or user interfaces. So like if you have like, if you're changing a color of a text box, or if you have like an icon of a certain color, this will also check that. Another thing to keep in mind, and if you're actually on this page, they actually have at the bottom a link to a link color contrast checker. So I'm going to also paste that here. So this one will actually, it's very similar, but it will also do a contrast for links. So it is one of the standards to have your links and your body of text have a contrast of 3:1. So that's always something that I try to check for, although it's sometimes overlooked. So make sure that you are checking for color contrast between your links and the surrounding text. Yes, it's for IBM SQL Accessibility Checker.
Good question from Julian. I can hop in, Maria, if you need help. But is it possible to use testing like Cypress to enforce accessibility?
Yes. So this is kind of what we covered a little bit in before, where we covered end-to-end testing and how we can help cover some of the accessibility issues. And yes, there are a few things that you can check, but I really like to reinforce that any automated testings that are done are not going to be able to catch all the accessibility requirements. So it will be really great to kind of I do think that it is a great tool, and I really recommend you doing this because it's going to help your development team continue to consider this as they kind of get failures, like if they do something wrong, right? So it's really important to at least kind of help the developers understand this better and catch their mistakes, and then that would lead them to hopefully read up more on the documentation.
Yeah, just to add to Maria, Chris Fritz gives a really great talk on accessibility-driven testing. And so just the long story short is that when you're doing end-to-end testing, actually try to use actual semantic elements and not just like IDs to things, which can then so that helps to at least encourage accessibility. At those slides that I dropped in for more info.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that, Ben.
So Thomas has another question. How do you or your company approach a target audience in order to test websites or apps?
Are you talking about like user research testing? Or?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So currently at the company that I work on now, we are fortunate enough where this is a big priority. So right now we have an accessibility team, right? So we do have UX researchers working to help us research. And if we ever need any additional research, we just have to kind of outline what is needed, and we're able to run those. Though I know that is not feasible for a lot of companies. So I would say, like, if that is not feasible for your companies, check out the research that has been done and published by other companies. I know that Marcy Sutton did a research thing on accessibility with something labs. I let me find it. It was really good. I talked about it in one of my talks. And then they kind of release like what users are actually expecting certain behaviors to be.
I agree with Jimmy. What a great company you work for. They invest the time and money into this.
I agree. I got very, very fortunate. Squid Ben. Okay, I cannot. If I can't find it by the time this is over, I will definitely make sure to send the research I was referring to in the main chat.
Sounds good.
No problem. I'm going to give a shout out to some great people to follow if you want to learn more about accessibility. I would say definitely follow Marcy Sutton. She does a lot of talks and she is a developer. Lindsay with React also. She does a lot of talks on accessibility with React. But it is very similar how we would implement things in Vue. So definitely check that out. And
Marcy's.
Oh, thank you.
You said Lindsay?
Yes.
Is it Copatch?
Let me see. I don't know.
Little Cope? Perfect. So this is her Twitter handle. Oh, Dimmy has a good question. Why did you choose the path of, I think you meant to say ally, because
Yeah, that's like internationalization, like
internationalization.
I-18N.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh yeah, long story short, long story short. I am a board certified assistant behavior analyst. So my previous field, I provided behavior therapy for people with developmental disabilities. And about 3 years ago, I got really sick and I had to switch fields kind of forcefully. So I ended up in tech since it was something I could do remotely from home if needed, based on some health issues. And the more I learned about front end, I discovered accessibility. And I was like, this is a great way to kind of bring back the field that I loved and that was so fulfilling for me. And I'm luckily, like, I know I'm super, super lucky that I was able to kind of combine those two fields and do something that I'm super passionate about.
We are all very grateful you're here, Maria.
Thanks, Ben. Let me, I'll link out to some other talks. But if you want, Ben, you could, I think they're calling us. I don't know if you heard that sound check.
I did not. Sounds good.
But if you want to take that, and then I'll
I'll
put some more resources in here and then join you.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. I'll see you on the main stage.
Thank you, Ben. So let me just give you all resources. Okay, so this will answer your question about my journey into this very specific piece of tech. All right, thank you all. I do not have laser saver emotion. Thank you all so much, and encourage you to check out my other talks if you want to learn more about accessibility, and be on the lookout for more content. And check out the new accessibility docs inside Vue 3, which I created. So I'm super, super excited, and hopefully I'll be able to share out some more content for Vue 3, working on like a guideline for that too. So WCAG AAA is not always 100% feasible. There are conflicting criteria that might not work for all applications. I'm not saying that it's absolutely impossible, but I would say that it is very hard to achieve for most applications. So definitely, as you're creating like the accessibility standards that you want to follow inside your company, I would definitely shoot for WCAG 2.1 AA, and where you can, definitely meet AAA. Like, for example, there are certain color contrasts that will meet AAA instead of AA. Those are easy wins. I would recommend you do that. But then there are more complex criteria that might be harder to implement. All right. And just so you know, WCAG 2.2 is about to come out. So also be on the lookout for that. There are some updated stuff in there that looks to be improving. So all right. Thank you all so much. I hope you got all your questions answered. And tweet at me if you need something. I'm always happy to help with accessibility. All right. Thanks, everyone.